This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm going to make an I identify as an attack helicopter joke. Well, no, I'm not. It's not 2013 anymore. Shit's played out. Move past it. Attack helicopters are pretty cool, though. Like, sometimes I wish I was one. I mean, you'd have to be crazy never to imagine what it's like to be an attack helicopter. No, I said I wouldn't. I said I wouldn't do it. Today, I want to talk about the AH-64 Apache. Now, this thing is the attack helicopter. Like, ask a 4-year-old to draw an attack helicopter, and this is what they're going to scribble out. This is also the first aircraft I've made a video on that I have some firsthand experience with, as they've been used to cover me and my battalion in live fire exercises during my time in the Army. There's nothing quite like looking up in the woods and seeing an Apache hover just over the treetops. I covered it a bit in my video on the A-10, but we'll go a little bit more in depth here on the overall history of helicopters in the US military. Up through World War II, Korea, and into early Vietnam, rotor wing aircraft were mostly regulated to logistical and transport roles. As the war went on, their potential as an attack role was evaluated, starting with the UH-1 Huey, which was retrofitted with gun pods and rockets. It was soon replaced by the AH-1 Cobra, which was a modified Huey purpose-built as an attack helicopter. It was smaller, faster, more armored, and equipped with more precise weapons like a gimbaling turret. While the Marines still use a variant of the Cobra, the Army adopted the AH-64 in 1981. Some Blackhawks like the DAP and AH-6 Little Birds are also used as helicopter gunships, although they're not purpose-built for the role, just retrofitted like the Hueys in the 70s. Other platforms that were tested but not adopted include the S-66, AH-56, and RAH-66, some of which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But first, let's talk about how helicopters work. I used to think helicopters would speed up their rotor blades to increase thrust. I mean, it makes sense in my head. That's how you increase thrust on a prop-driven airplane, after all. But that's not the case. Moving the throttle up and down changes what's called the collective of the blades, the angle at which the blades are set to. Increasing or decreasing that angle adds more or less lift, as well as torque. Helicopters will also always have a secondary rotor to counteract the torque produced by the main one. Otherwise, Sir Isaac Newton bitch slaps it into a spin. Sometimes it's a second main rotor in a stack. Sometimes it's a second main rotor positioned out of the way somewhere else on the aircraft, or even two main rotors interlaced with one another. When using two main rotors, it's important that they spin in opposite directions. Otherwise, the bird will, again, spin out of control. The most common anti-torque rotors are called tail rotors, mounted to the rear of the helicopter. While the main rotor wants to force the aircraft to spin, the tail rotor will push air the opposite way. These traditionally have been mounted on the side of the tail, but as technology has advanced, we now see them more integrated into the tail as a ducted rotor. Typically, helicopter rotor blades are attached on a hinge, which keeps the lift even among the blades. Helicopters are insanely complex machines that are different enough from planes to carry out their own niche as an aircraft, like extended loiter times and the obvious ability to hover. Once the US had the AH-1 Cobra up and running in Vietnam, the idea to expand on the concept of an attack helicopter became a priority. The AH-1 was relatively cheap and on the smaller side, but what if we cranked it up to 11? Lockheed and Sikorsky both had airframes go to trial. The Sikorsky S-66, which was a pretty conventional helicopter, especially when compared to the Lockheed AH-56. Also known as the Cheyenne. Now, the Cheyenne was using a bunch of new technology, including a very novel idea called a rigid rotor. While conventional helicopter blades are hinged, Lockheed had developing a system where the blades are firmly attached to the rotor shaft, accompanied by a stabilizer ring on top. This gave the helicopter much more precise control over its movements due to gyroscopic stabilization. You can see this kind of design philosophy in modern-day quadcopter drones. The Cheyenne also came with stubby lifting wings and a pusher propeller, allowing it to transition to a more airplane-like forward flight where the main rotor would mostly just spin on its own like an auto gyro. The pusher prop could also be reversed to help slow the helicopter down in a dive or help it reverse without the need to change the angle of the aircraft. It was armed with 2 turrets mounted underneath, one being an autocannon with a 360-degree gimbal, the other being a nose-mounted 7.62 minigun or 40mm grenade launcher, both of which could be controlled by a head-mounted targeting system worn by the gunner. The gunner also had a chair that could turn 360 degrees, a targeting pod, and 6 hardpoints on the wings for pre-existing missiles, rockets, or gun pods to be affixed. It could fly at 220 knots and had a fair range of 2,500 miles, which is insane. It won the contest hands down, and an order was put in by the US for 375 airframes. Unfortunately, only 10 were delivered. A quirk in the design of the rigid rotor downed an airframe when a rotor blade struck the fuselage, and the test pilot lost his life. The incident, coupled with Air Force generals at the time trying to kill the project in order to fund what would eventually become the A-10, led to the cancellation of the AH-56.
No, it was a shit show, obviously.
However, if you were to build the Cheyenne with a traditional rotor system, it's basically a prototype Apache. Many aspects of what the Army wanted in an attack helicopter came off of the AH-56. Things like an autocannon turret tied to where the gunner looks, an integrated targeting pod, a larger overall size for more payload, even Doppler radar for target acquisition. These are all things that carried over, stolen by Boeing, into the AH-64, which was adopted around 15 years later. The AH-56 was truly a wonder of its time.
Wonders! We're surrounded by wonders! That phone in your pocket could power a rocket, but what does the military have?
So, let's talk about the AH-64 Apache. What can it do and what it carries? Its main weapon is the chin-mounted M230 30mm chain gun. Really fast, I used to think chain gun meant belt-fed, but that's not what it means. Chain gun refers to a chain-driven operating system. Whereas most guns use gas or recoil to make the bolt of a weapon extract an old shell and load a new one, a chain gun means a chain is linked to the bolt and the movement of that chain will make the gun cycle, meaning even if the weapon is empty, it could still technically run, since it's not dependent on propellant from the rounds cycle. Anyway, this is a 30mm autocannon, which may make you think of
the General Electric Gal AA Adventure 30mm hydraulically driven 7-barrel rotary autocannon.
Carried by the A-10, but it's not the same round. The A-10 shoots a 30 by 173mm round, and the Apache here rocks a 30 by 113mm round. So substantially shorter, but still very effective. The reason I think it's more effective than the A-10's gun is A, it's generally shooting from a much closer distance, and B, it's on a gimbal. It can be tied to either the fire control radar or the optical targeting system or the gunner's head. The Apache can also carry the AGM-114 Hellfire missile, which I'll touch on more in a second, Hydra 70 rockets, and in some cases, AIM-92 Stinger IR anti-aircraft missiles. Once the AH-64D variant arrived on the scene, it came with what's known as the longbow radar. Technically, the AH-64D is called the Apache Longbow, but the most notable difference is the hat that they gave it. Anyway, as you can see, the radar is mounted on top of the rotor blades. It also doesn't spin with them. I don't even want to begin to think about how they pulled off this mounting solution. Anyway, the Apache will use the radar to hide behind hills, buildings, trees, etc., and pop up just the radar over cover and use it to scan for targets. The radar return being read by the longbow can tell not just the distance and direction of the target, but check the shape of it against a known database and identify vehicle by type. It can also do this to stationary vehicles, so there's no notching that will save you here. It can then send this targeting information not just to its own weapon systems, but to other Apaches via data link. It's not uncommon to see just one Apache in a squadron running the radar and acting as a spotter for the rest. The targeting system located on the nose of the aircraft is known as the TADS, or Target Acquisition and Designation Sites. It's pretty much a built-in targeting pod that has both thermal, color, and night vision. It's mainly used by the gunner to lock the Apache's weapons to a target. It has a laser designator for the Hellfires, and it can be linked with the chin gun. Targeting pods are incredibly important for situational awareness on a battlefield, and when they're a default built-in feature like here and on the F-35, it can make the aircraft much more effective. Next, I want to take an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite weapon systems, the AGM-114 Hellfire. Hellfires are a very versatile missile. Generally, they're used in air-to-ground, hence the AGM in the name, and mostly mounted on helicopters. But they can also be used against helicopters or slow-moving planes. They've also been used as surface-to-air missiles and surface-to-surface missiles. They are generally laser-guided, but they can also be radar-guided by the longbow radar. There is a super long-range version, versions that are mounted on UAVs, versions for anti-tank and even anti-personnel. It's been kicking for as long as the Apache in the late 80s, but it is soon to be replaced by the AGM-179. It's essentially a super Hellfire, being optically guided as opposed to laser guided. This means fire and forget capabilities with the ability to independently track whatever it was launched at, even if the target is moving, and LOAL or lock on after launch. It can even abort if it knows the intended target won't be hit. The F-35 is slated to carry these missiles, and I'd expect to see them on A-10s, Cobras, and Apaches soon too. While we're on the subject, I also want to talk some shit on one of my least favorite weapon systems, Hydra rockets. These are basically still a World War II era weapon. Personally, I feel like they're a waste of space on the pylon. They're pretty ineffective against armored targets, and you have to aim the entire helicopter to fire them, and they're not particularly accurate. They're great against infantry and unarmored vehicles, sure, but so is the gun. You can carry 8 more Hellfires and score 8 more tank kills by replacing the Hydras, which will either bounce off or miss a tank and be overkill for a dude standing in a field. The one thing they have going for them is that they're cheap, but this is military aviation we're talking about. Since when are we worried about the bill? Hydras suck, stop using them. This might be a hot take, but I don't care. Yell at me in the comments, I won't read it. Apaches are used in a few different roles, the most notable being close air support. The gun and Hellfires, when used with the TADS and radar, are precision weapons, especially since helicopter engagement distances are generally pretty close, under 5 miles usually. This accuracy combined with a long loiter time inherent to helicopters makes it an excellent close air support platform. It can also perform deep strikes against pre-planned targets using terrain masking as a form of stealth. It can also use the TADS to act as a recon platform and makes an excellent convoy escort, being able to match the speed with trucks and tanks very easily. The helicopter comes with 2 crew, a pilot and gunner. Pilot being in the back and gunner being in the front. The distinction between the two isn't as rigid as you might think, however. Both crew members are trained in each role and can switch if need be. Hell, each seat can both fly the aircraft and fire the weapons if need be. The positions are just more optimized for their respective roles. As far as variants go, we have the A, B, C, D, and now E with a possible F variant. The A is the introductory model, and as far as 1980s tech goes, it's about what you would expect. The B model introduced GPS as well as improved radios and rotor blades in 1991. The C variant ended up just being the D variant with no radar, so that designation was dropped. The D introduced the fire control radar and data link, as well as an expanded front end of the aircraft to fit all the new systems and help survivability for the crew. It also became the Apache Longbow. The newest Block D variants have been renamed the AH-64 Guardian. Damn, that name sucks. Anyway, these latest models pretty much just have improved versions of existing systems, most notably the engines. They've had some issues with the most recent deliveries, specifically with the electrical generators. Boeing plans on continuing to produce Apaches for the next few years, and starting with the new line of F variants in 2030. Many countries other than the US fly the Apache, 19 nations in total. The US, the UK, and Israel should come as no surprise, but also countries like India, Greece, and Egypt. One notable blocked sale was to Israel under the Obama administration after footage emerged of Israelis doing some not very cash money things with the helicopters. Before I forget about it, I want to talk about the RAH-66 Comanche, which was envisioned to be a low observable replacement for the Apache. The project was scrapped, unfortunately, due to budget, but working prototypes did make it in the air. It was able to store up to 6 Hellfires internally and rocked a 20mm nose cannon. Notable features to help with its stealth design were the profile of the rotors that made it very quiet while flying, the ducted and canted tail rotor, in addition to the more standard stealth techniques like a faceted fuselage and ram coating. It boasted a radar cross-section 350 times smaller. than the Apache. Another radical change was the pilot and gunner position switched, putting the flyer up front and the shooter in back. To me, this makes more sense. In games, trying to land an Apache with some asshole right in my way proves to be a bit more difficult than it should be. Being up front with less obstruction is preferable in my experience. I always hear,
sitting slightly elevated in the back, the pilot station also gives a clear forward view, but is better optimized for flying.
But being 2 feet higher than the gunner when we're already 1,000 feet up isn't giving me any real height advantage. Sorry, side rant. Anyway, after $7 billion in development of the Comanche, we're still rocking the same old Apache. The topic has come up in recent years that the idea of the attack helicopter is becoming obsolete. They typically hover or fly slow, susceptible to small arms or 50 cal fire, RPGs, or manpads. They're complicated, they're vulnerable, they're harder to train for, harder to maintain. I'm not even sure if they have electronic warfare or jamming capabilities, but if not, they should certainly look into signing up for NordVPN. With just one click, NordVPN can secure your browsing while not seeing any slowdown in internet speed. Say you're an Apache gunner on a long patrol, bored out of your mind. You can use NordVPN to connect to servers back in the US to watch all your favorite movies and TV shows without being geo-blocked by whatever country they decided to stick you in. You can now catch up on your binge of Supernatural while your pilot zens out for 3 hours.
Sammy!
If you need to stay stealthy while flying, you should feel safe knowing Nord doesn't track anything you do online. And just as importantly, they make sure no one else does too. And if you ever need someone to spot for you, Nord offers 24/7 customer support. While I don't think you can load it up on an Apache MFD, Nord does have dedicated apps on all major platforms, and you can protect up to 10 devices with one account. If you want to keep your data link safe and secure, head down to the description and click on my link for 4 extra months of NordVPN. Thanks again to NordVPN, and now back to the video. So, we'd covered the Apache. It's a big aspect of American air power, certainly an iconic aircraft. I guess that's why it's been in so many video games. I mean, it came out pretty much when video games came out, so they go hand in hand. All that being said, it's time to get to our honorable mentions. These are all video games that I didn't have time to fit in the main video, but I still wanted to showcase. I wonder what song I picked.
Bombs away, blowing up the White House on the lake. Shining it right now. Shimmy, shimmy, y'all put me in a box in the Hall of Fame. Bombs away, blowing up the White.
This game actually had a pretty big update since I last talked about it. It added a heavy lift VTOL aircraft that can also be used as a gunship with a side-mounted cannon. So I guess this means a revisit old topics video is definitely in the future. But for today, we're talking about the AH-66 Cheyenne? I don't know, the helicopter. Now, it's worth saying most of Nuclear Options vehicles are, in fact, multi-crew. However, there's no multi-crew functionality in the game. It's just always manned by AI. This is something I really hope gets addressed as the game evolves. In almost all other airframes, your co-pilot does jack shit, just takes up space. In the Chi-Com, however, he actually earns his keep. If you don't have the gun as your selected weapon, the gunner will automatically start shooting at whatever target is closest. You can engage with other weapons while he does his thing. And while that's cool, a big aspect we'll see later in the video is the dynamic of having a real person in the bird with you. Faking it just isn't the same. That's why I'm putting Nuke Op at the bottom of the list. Now, the other reason it goes way down here is because it's not an actual Apache. Hell, you might even be saying, but mimiaga, it's the AH-46. That means it's a stealth attack helicopter. Isn't this closer to the Comanche? And no, hypothetical viewer, much like the Apache, the pilot sits in back and the gunner in front, not the other way around like on the Comanche. It also has winglets with hard points, where the Comanche keeps its weapons internal. And it has 4 rotor blades instead of 5. It has way more Apache DNA in it than Comanche, although I'll admit there is some. Now, while Nuclear Option does have great damage models, I don't really care that much. A missile hits me, I crashed. That's all I need. I don't need to see my airframe break into 247 pieces. And the damage model is something that is touted by the game as a selling point. What is lacking here is the flight model. It's very basic. It feels more on the side of GTA, almost zero torque to compensate for. That being said, it is a fun ride, and for a game focused on arcade-ish fixed wing flight, I shouldn't really expect any more than what I got for a helicopter. I do feel almost any of the fixed wing options outperform the sugarcane, but honestly, that's true of any helicopter in any game or real life. Either way, Nuclear Option is a fantastic game. I feel it needs multi-crew functionality and always VR support. If it ever gets those, then it'll be a top 3 flight sim for sure. It might already be there.
What's poppin'? Brand new whip, just hopped in. I got options. I can pass that bitch like Stockton. Just joshing. I'ma spend this holiday locked in. My body got rid of them toxins. Sports in the top 10. I can put the ball in the end zone, put a bad bitch in the friend zone. This shit sound like an intro jet song. Give me that tempo. Told Pooh he a fool with this shit. Told her don't let her friends know. In the building I move like a dime.
I feel like I need to clarify this every video I put War Thunder in, so here it is. I am not a War Thunder player. I do not have the time to put in to grind all this stuff out. I actually applied for one of those like media accounts with everything unlocked, and I was told I'm still too small, so I guess the snail gets another chunk out of my credit card. So there are 3 Apaches in War Thunder. An AH-64A, an AH-64D, and in the premium shop, there's an AH-64A, but Greek.
Nine, I'm Greek. My name is Mikado.
Guess which one I'm looking at. So, the Greek AH-64A. First thing that popped out at me was how different the A variant's cockpit is. I've seen D variants in games and in person a few times, but never the A variant. It's pretty much the same kind of difference in vibes in between the A-10A and A-10C. Not that War Thunder has anything useful in the cockpits really, it's mostly window dressing. That clip does look kind of familiar though. I also want to clarify that I tested this helicopter in a custom game with mostly bots in VR with everything bound to my HOTAS. There were some of my stream viewers in the lobby with me, both on my team and the opposing team, but they mostly just pulled off stunts in front of me. The TAD system, at least in VR, leaves a lot to be desired. I can click a button to slew my TADs where I'm looking, and if I manage to do that right over an enemy vehicle, it'll lock onto it. But if I open the TAD screen, all of a sudden I'm in an IMAX theater looking at it, and not really in a VR environment. There is a display in the cockpit that does mirror what the TADs can see, but it isn't really high fidelity enough to be useful, and I can't actually use my joystick to move it. The chin gun is pretty effective if getting accurate shots on target, and while it can get mobility kills on modern MBTs after a substantial burst, lighter armored vehicles or older tanks are very susceptible to the 30mm rounds. I will sing the praises of the flight model in War Thunder for helicopters. If you fly too fast, you get retreating blade stalls, essentially the blade that's moving back backwards will have 0 airspeed, causing the helicopter to just kind of flip over and drop like a rock. You can also run into a vortex ring state, essentially flying through your own low pressure caused by your rotor blades when descending in a hover, again, making you drop like a rock. These kinds of stalls being modeled while adding difficulty is also adding some of the realism other games lack. However, the biggest thing War Thunder is missing here is, again, multi-crew. You cannot have your buddy do the bangity bang bang while you do the whoosh whoosh whoosh. And just like Nuke Op, that's why War Thunder is going lower on the list. It's still a good experience, and hell, it's even an Apache this time. But while there is an NPC in front of you, he's just dead weight. Oh, what's this? An Apache where I can have a real person shoot for me? I'm honestly kind of amazed it took us until GTA to get this functionality. Now, the Apache in GTA is known as the F1H Hunter and has a long history in GTA, first appearing way back in Vice City. Starting off, the flight model here is Baby Dumb. This is a video game, not a sim or sim light. Anyone who has even held a controller can fly helicopters in GTA. Model-wise, while older games have a bit more faithful recreation to an Apache, the most modern version features a ducted rotor. The longbow-style radar is also absent on the aircraft, but everything shows up on GTA's radar anyway, unless it's specifically a stealth aircraft, like the Comanche-style helicopter that's also here. There is an autocannon that is manned by the gunner and fire via a TAD-style camera. The rate of fire is noticeably slow to help balance, otherwise the chin gun would be insanely capable. It's kind of a bummer that while the gun can be aimed straight down, the model doesn't reflect that. The rounds will just come out at 90 degrees. The pilot controls the other weapons, which are Hellfires and Hydras. The Hellfires are the standard GTA missiles that everything uses. They're slow and will lock on to either players or hostile NPCs, but not random cars. The Hydras are the exact same thing, but rapid fire and have no guidance. Neat thing, in all the vehicles added to GTA, starting with the same patch that added the Apache, when you fire the missiles, they actually disappear off the racks, which is something earlier vehicles don't do. If you're looking to troll a car show, or even have some air support in a mission, it's a solid choice if you can man both slots. Most of the effectiveness comes from the splitting of duties, with one person focusing on flying and the other person focusing on shooting. If you're going to be flying solo, there are better options.
Singing low while I pop a bottle off of your chain swinging, clang clang, and it costs a lot. Bitch, I'm always at the guala, yeah, and you are not badass beat. Keep on going till you hit the spot. Whoa, I'm a big bag hunter with the bow. She got a big bed, never drop it low. Mama called me and she happy with the grow. Never ever fall for a body that's a no.
Just bought the Kenny about a million options. So just talking to stop doing the agreement. I'm rock arenas, bringing the peace. I'm bumping that park in the car, pretending I got all the eyes on me.
Say it with me, everybody. This one's a mod. The Project Apache mod is pretty much a standard with any modern setting Army unit, at least in the ones I've been in. The Apache features a somewhat clickable cockpit, including the starter procedure. You can overspin the rotors and kill the aircraft by flying too hard, which is the first time we've seen that. While I don't feel any VRS, I have seen RBS when going too fast. The pilot only seems to be able to fire Hydras, but ew, why would you even bring those? And the gunner fires Hellfires and the gun. Hellfires here are both laser guided and radar guided. You can also choose to not run the fire control radar if you want a sleeker look. Once again, this thing requires 2 people to be used to its full effectiveness. It slots in nicely with the rest of Arma, and it's always fun providing close air support to actual players on the ground, not just NPCs. If you ever want your assault to be covered by me and an Apache, consider joining the 188th Gaslighters, the Arma unit that I've joined. Ops are on Saturdays, and it's a fun group. We're ready to up our numbers with many different roles available. If you want to see what it's like, I do stream our ops, and you can even go back and watch all the VODs. Anyway, recruitment speech over. Project Apache is the Arma Apache. It takes a bit more skill and learning, but it's the way to go if you want to be as authentic as possible in Arma. Oh, and the Comanche is in the base game too. It's objectively better in terms of performance.
Con los terroristas.
the Harlem Shake.
Oh, VTOL VR, my beloved. I know I'm going to hear the same arguments as in Nukop here, saying this is more of a Comanche than an Apache, and for the same reasons, no it isn't. Pilot gunner orientation, the cockpit layout, the wings with hard points, this thing is more Apache than anything else. I won't just die on this hill, I'll kill you on it. Anyway, the AH-64 Dragonfly. This is the first, and as of now, only helicopter in VTOL. It was also the first multi-crew aircraft, although all DLC airframes since have also been multi-crew. The flight model here is probably the best we've looked at so far, with maybe War Thunder being a bit better. I've never experienced VRS in VTOL, but I've definitely flipped this bitch zooming around faster than I had any business zooming. Armament wise, the nose gun can either be the standard 30mm single barrel cannon or a 20mm rotary cannon. While the 30mm sounds like it'd be the more effective weapon, the rate of fire and range on the 20mm actually makes it a better choice 9 times out of 10. Pylon wise, we have Hydras, lots of Hydras actually. We also have Hellfires and new tow missiles that can kill bunkers. My favorite choice is the AGM-145s, which are the VTOL version of the 179s and almost always a better choice. They also have GBU-39ERs, which are rocket-boosted, GPS-guided small diameter glide bombs, which is something VTOL made up, and honestly, a cool idea, as it gave the Dragonfly the ability to kill bunkers before it got the tow missiles. Like the last few entries on the list, the best part of flying the 94 is having a gunner with you. I will say the middle MFD for the gunner, which is usually displays the TADs, seems a bit low resolution for me. I have a hard time seeing whatever I'm targeting, and because of that, I dislike being the gunner in VTOL. However, you can fully operate the helicopter from the pilot seat all by yourself to a very good degree still. I've done entire missions on my own and never felt handicapped by not having a gunner. It does sometimes struggle to compete with the other fast movers that populate VTOL, so you'll generally find missions with helicopters having only helicopters or supported by a small number of the less capable fixed wing like the T-55 or AV-42C. This is an amazing version of the Apache, and I cannot plug VTOL VR enough. Buy this game. I don't even care if you don't have a VR headset. Just buy it. Support it. Go. Do it now. I'll wait.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
So, while you're buying VTOL, let's talk about DCS. It shouldn't come as a surprise that this is at the end of the video. See this little keypad here? This thing gave me so much anxiety when I saw it in other games. I knew the day would come in DCS where I'm gonna have to use this thing to try and run Doom. I've actually been told that you can run Doom on an Apache. Anyway, here we are. What can I say? This is as realistic as you get when it comes to flying an Apache. The cockpit is 1-to-1 down to the little details like scratches on the interior, fraying on the sunshades, and the little swing of the clip. You can, of course, have a buddy fly up front with you as the gunner or run with Jorge, the jester of the Apache. The flight model is the most realistic by far, RBS and VRS in full force. It also feels just a little bit on the floaty side, which might sound obvious because, yeah, duh, it floats in the air. Maybe slippery would be a better term for it. I imagine the rigid rotor system of the AH-66 is the solution to this kind of flight characteristic. I've flown FPV drones before, and the stability on those is so incredible. So the hinged rotor here feels more apparent, even compared to the other games on the list. Now here's the kicker. AH-94 in VTOL is $12. The DCS AH-64D is $65. And you might argue that you need a VR setup to play VR, but you really need a HOTAS and at least track IR, if not VR, to play DCS on any kind of realistic level. So it's kind of a wash, but it is unmatched in terms of realism, making it the best AH-64 in gaming. Helicopters are wild. They are entirely different beasts when compared to fixed wings. From what I understand, military pilots have a sort of pecking order in place. Fighter pilots are top dog, followed by bomber pilots, then cargo and transport, and at the bottom, helicopters. Which is such nonsense to me. Put a rotor pilot in a plane, I bet he would do just fine. But put a fixed wing pilot in a helicopter, he's probably gonna fucking die. And I've met some fighter pilots, or seen them on podcasts and stuff. They tend to have a bit of an ego about them. And don't get me wrong, it's well deserved, they do cool shit. But I've also met Apache pilots after they've flown right over my head and blasted stuff. And they are some of the most chill, down-to-earth people you will ever meet. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this, so I'll just say that's all I got. If you want to support the channel, the absolute best way is to become a member on Patreon, which I've linked in the description. You can also become a channel member here on YouTube or snag yourself a little NordVPN with free 4 months. The Nord link and the link to my Discord are also both down in the description. But the easiest thing you can do is like, comment, and subscribe. And maybe show this video to a friend. As always, I am Mimiaga, and I send this message to any other military aviation enthusiasts taking refuge in the comments. Thank you for watching, and take care.
Oh, fuck! Fucking hell! Fucking hell!